Today on Accidental Experts with Bryce Hamilton.
Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to welcome Courtney Zentz back. She is with Tiny Transitions, a sleep coaching company, and she's going to talk to us today about elementary school kids and troubles with transitioning to bed, issues with getting them to sleep in their own bed, and giving us strategies on how to overcome sleep challenges. With that, let's get to Courtney.
The school age. I love them. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We're so glad to have you back. Okay, so we talked about in our toddler episode about how much sleep toddlers are supposed to get. How much sleep are school age kids supposed to get?
So it depends on the range, right? When you're talking about elementary age, I would say it's probably like 10 to 12 hours of sleep is a good baseline for the elementary school age. As children move up through middle school and high school, you're kind of looking somewhere between 8 and 10 hours of sleep for optimal growth.
Yeah, I would say, I'm thinking about that. I'm like, we definitely do not get enough sleep at our house. I mean, there's no way that anybody in my house, regardless of whether they're 13 or 2, are getting that much sleep, I don't think.
Well, do you wake up happy? And do you have to wake them up in the morning?
Most of them, no.
Okay.
So one of them, sometimes. Yes.
And that's usually the biggest trigger is like, if your child has to be woken up to go to school, they're generally not going to bed at the right time because they didn't complete the right amount of cycles to naturally wake up, so it's something you kind of look at. But I get as they grow, there's also an expectation of activities and extracurricular and things and homework and pressures and all that start to grow, I would say like the ranges are there. Now I follow the American Academy of Sleep Medicine for their guidelines around sleep. And there's a pretty big range. I mean, I think they even say for like babies, it's like 4 to 12 months is like 12 to 16 hours. I'm like, that's a really big window,
Yeah.
So I think you have to look at it and go, is my kid waking up happy? Do they have dark circles under their eyes? Are they rested and refreshed? Are they waking up miserable? Are you having to wake them up? Is the alarm going off, right? Because in theory, our body is very, up and down, regulated wise, body clock. I could go to bed every night at 9 and I wake every morning at 5 without an alarm every day because my body clock is set. Kids are different and it's hard and there's a lot going on with their, with just their busy lives.
Yes, absolutely. So what do you think things get in the way of good sleep at this age? I mean, you were just mentioning some of those, but what gets in the way?
So I think one is just a lack of knowledge of how much sleep a kid should have, right? I would say between 8 and 10 hours is still a great baseline for many kids kind of throughout their entire school career. I think you function optimally. I think diet has played a huge role in the ability for kids to settle. There's energy drinks now and lots of sugar and such, and none of those things are great for sleep. So I think looking at like the way our children are eating, I always joke with my husband, if I could go back to school to be something else, it would be a functional nutritionist, but I'm almost 45 now. It's a little late for that, but I think about it sometimes. But I think diet, I think technology is big, right? That's new and kids are on their phones. Like we have a bed. I buy the little purple squishies that they sell on their website. They're like $3 and they're little mini beds. And our phones go to sleep on the beds at night. Now, my kids do not have devices, but we also have very strict rules around iPads. You are allowed the iPad on Saturday and Sunday for 1 hour, and that's it. My kids are 8 and 10. So we are very strict with the devices. They will not have a device in their bedroom. They will not have a TV in their bedroom. As kids grow, I know that starts to get harder, but I really encourage families to have some sort of rule where it's like everybody's phone is going to sleep on the beds tonight, in the like living room or the kitchen where you can kind of put them all to sleep, and not allowing a device in the bedroom because it will keep kids up at night. I've peers in the neighborhood who have kids in school, and some of my clients, like they'll sit up all night and watch TikTok videos, not to just shame TikTok, but it's a pretty big offender where you just get like sucked into, to some of these messages and texting and different things. It's like your body needs to function. So I think the technology is a big player of that. And I think just generalized, extracurricular activities and sports are huge. The pressure is crazy. the amount of practices and the time they get home and the expectations of homework and, getting all that stuff done, I think the anxiety also tends to grow as kids get older. So there's just such a myriad of like overpressed kids who are looking for an outlet from maybe those devices or looking to chat with their friends because that's the only connection they have because they've gotten a bunch of sports all day and homework and stuff. It's just a fine balance. I think as parents, we're all trying to navigate it as best we can. I will say if kids are going to be like watching TV a little bit later to like decompress, that you put blue light blocking glasses on. So at least you tick off one thing from the box because that blue light's a stimulant. It stimulates the amygdala and prefrontal cortex and it provides your body the inability to settle down to sleep. So if you can try to protect certain things like that, there's a huge initiative with schools about starting later. So I was involved in this committee here in Philadelphia about starting schools later and this initiative to bump high schools back by like 30 minutes. And the cost was just astronomical to move the clock like 30 minutes. I think it would have cost our district $16 million a year just to change the schedule for 30 minutes. And so they said it's just simply not worth it for 30 minutes. But that's what they were trying to do because these kids are getting on the bus at like 6 a.m. and they're losing valuable sleep. And then it's showing in the rest of their day, their tardiness, their, immune systems and such. So I think it's a real challenge. And as parents, we're just trying to do our best to like help fulfill our kids' life and make it happy and wholesome and, do the best we can too, as, families trying to figure it all out in a crazy time,
Yeah. Well, and you talking about extracurriculars too, I'm always surprised at when sports practices are, right? And it's like grade level. I'm like, who decided this, right? But I also know that there's only a limited amount of space, right? And time, but it can be hard. And I think as a parent, for me personally, like we had to look at that to say, is this activity worth it to disrupt sleep? Which was a hard question for us to answer. Because, we do want our kids to go to bed at a regular time because it helps them to be happy, healthy individuals and it helps us to do the same. And so I think, sometimes as being a parent is asking those hard questions of like, is 3 activities after school on one day reasonable? Is right, whatever that is.
Yeah, no, totally. Like my daughter does competitive Irish dance and she's quite good at it, which means she's dancing with a lot of the older girls. She is 8 years old. So I'm like, you're 8. And we're going to balance that. But her practices, like sometimes the practice is 6:30 to 9. I'm like, she's asleep at 8:30 at the absolute latest. And she sleeps in, which tells me I have to wake her. You know what I mean? And it's like, you're trying to balance that where I'm like, okay. And I'm like, no, I'm picking her up at 8, and they're cool with that, because she's only 8 years old and, she's dancing with 16-year-olds. Like, okay. So it's just, I think as parents, to your point, like what can we control? Like my son does 3 sports in the fall. He does baseball, soccer, and football. And it just so happens that everything lines up with like different nights, but then he goes to a little school that does give homework. Some of the schools around here do not give homework. We go to the Catholic school here down the road and they have an hour homework every night. Oh, and you're supposed to be a kid. Oh, and you have 3 sports. Oh, and all weekend you're playing sports. Oh, and you want to see your friends and do the things, And I think to your point, like my daughter just let go of Girl Scouts because I'm like, do you want to do Girl Scouts or not? She's like, well, I want to do the dance. I'm like, the school's going to do the dance anyway. But like, if we're doing this, we're doing it. And you got to tell me now. And she's like, no, I'll let it go, because it's just like, you're just hemorrhaging activities, and I'm definitely happy my kids are active. I want them playing sports or doing things, whatever your kid's into. That's great. Mine just happen to be sports, but it's like, I want them doing that stuff versus like sitting home and going, can I play the Xbox? And
sure.
I think there's a balance to that. Like, if it's raining one day, my kids get 15 minutes during the week as a bonus. That's it, and like, we just set rules in our house. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. I know it like can quickly spiral. So we, as parents, we do the best we can. Do we cave sometimes? Yeah. But like we try, to your point, to look at the sports and my daughter's like, I want to take gymnastics. I'm like, cool, we're going to go every night for 5 hours. Cause that's what gymnastics looks like when you do it at your age. And she's like, oh, that's a lot. I'm like, right. We're not getting into gymnastics. Irish dance is good, and sometimes I have to like check them a little bit on it. My son's not going to probably do soccer next year. He played a couple years of travel soccer. He's just doing CYO this year, but I'm like, does this really, we're not moving the needle with this and you're not playing for the union. So I think next year we're going to drop this off the equation. It's like, I think they're overscheduled and, as they grow, they have so many other priorities too. And the homework gets harder. And, my nieces just moved to high school now. And in the public school here where they go, they did not have homework for 8 grades. Okay. Not an ounce of homework every night. And there's an aspect of that. I do agree that it's nice that the kids can just come home and be kids. Well, guess what? I just saw them last night for dinner at my mother-in-law's 80th birthday. And she's like, high school sucks. And I have 3.5 hours of homework every night. And I've never had homework before. So it's like a huge shock. So her transition to high school, which is supposed to be this like amazing time, has been really hard the past couple of weeks, because she's like, this is not what I envisioned high school to be. And oh, what's this thing called homework now, you know?
Yeah, no, it is so hard. There's so much to balance. And I think we need to learn the skills too to manage our time. And I think giving kids, to your point on our toddler episode, you were talking about choices, right? Like, do you want to do this or that? So it's not necessarily, sometimes we have to step in as parents and veto something. But I think, giving them a choice like this or that, it's hard to do both, is also helpful. And we need the time to be able to get home to go to sleep. Like, I know that for me, even as an adult, I have to be like, okay, computer off, right? Like at this time I have boundaries on my phone, even though I'm pretty good about putting it down, not always, but like it needs to turn off apps so that it's not desirable. Like that yummy striped gum, right? When it's the boring thing, it just does not pursue you as much. Okay, so let's talk about what advice you have for parents who have an elementary school student who is sleeping in their bed still. So whether they're kindergarten or older, what and they're ready for them to leave their bed. Maybe it was something that happened where the kid was sick or the parent was sick or whatever it was, or it was a fun thing and then it turned into an every night thing. What advice you have for helping get that kid out of their bed?
So I think being committed to the change, right? Because the commitment and the consistency is probably the single biggest thing that you have to be ready to make the change with. We talked a little bit on the toddler episode, like if you've had a kid in your bed for 5 years every day, and then you just expect that on 5 years and one day, they're going to go back to their own room willingly, like good luck, right? So you kind of have to set a boundary that says, hey, look, like we love that you're in our room. And if that brings you comfort, great. You're no longer welcome in our bed, right? So I tell parents, I'm like, if you want to make a slower transition and kind of try to do it where you're sort of diffusing behavior. And what you were talking about with the fruit striped gum, I'll just remind listeners, right? Fruit striped gum is a gum that as a kid I grew up having. It was very fruity. You got 5 flavors, you got tattoos. It was a cool pack and it was really good. And after about 2 minutes, it tastes like chewing an Amazon box, right? And so you kind of have to create, like right now, your toddler or your school age kid being in your bed is sort of like fruit striped gum. Like to them, it's like, this is great. Why would I want to get out of here? But you have to make it where it's like, no, you're going over here to the box, right? You're going to taste like the box. And when you do that and you do it in a way that is slow and steady with consistency, usually in about a week, you can fix the behavior as long as you're consistent, right? At 3 a.m. when they poke you to get in bed, you have to say no. And you got to have a plan to balance that boundary, right? So sometimes it's starting with like, your choice tonight is to sleep on the sleeping bag on the floor, not something you're making feel like the Taj Mahal. It is literally a sleeping bag on the floor and that's it. Okay. And after a couple of days, that floor gets kind of hard. So you always give kids choices, like you can sleep in here tonight, or you can sleep in your bed where it's comfy and cozy and you have all your stuff and you're in space and it's like a lot better. But after a couple of days, that floor gets hard, So I think having parents have a plan to go into it, right? And then be able to be consistent with it. I worked with a family over the past year and they were lovely. 3 kids, 8 years old, 6 years old, and 3 years old. They haven't slept in the same bed in 5 years. Okay. So imagine the strain on the marriage. They're like, our life is falling apart. These kids are not sleeping. The husband traveled, from like a private equity standpoint. He's always all over the world doing different stuff with his company. And the 3 little girls are just exhausted. The mom's exhausted and the dad's exhausted, right? So he's like, you got to fix this. How can we fix this? And the mom and dad were lovely. Probably one of my favorite sets of couples I ever worked with. And we started with the 8-year-old. And then we worked on the 6-year-old, and then we worked on the 4-year-old, and they were all different, frankly, like very different. So it wasn't like one thing would work for all 3. And the 8-year-old struggled a lot with anxiety, separation anxiety, things like that. And they're also growing, right? Like into high school, you start to get like more emotions and more friendships and more things going on, right? And I talked a little bit about this, but like giving ways for kids to understand the boundary and help them love their sleep environment, have them invest in their sleep environment, right? They want to fall asleep on a bed that's comfortable, with sheets that are comfortable, with a comforter that's comfortable, with an environment around them that's comfortable, and make it a fun place that they're calm and cool and comfortable in. I often will have children learn how to use writing, right? And have that be a way to communicate back and forth with parents. Give a kid a journal and say, hey, like, this is your private space. You can choose to write in this and lock it, and it's your thoughts, or you can choose to use it. And if I see it out and unlocked, or get them maybe 2 books, one for private thoughts, one for talking to you. It can be a great way to start communication with your child. Maybe they're going through something that you didn't realize, but they're afraid to talk to you about it, that's causing them to want to come into your bed at night, right? And so that way to communicate with kids without having to communicate can, I think, be helpful. I think our generation right now that's in the middle and high school struggles with communication. You know why? Because they only text. They text their friends. They don't have to pick up the phone and go, hi, Mrs. McLaughlin, can Melanie play today? No, they go, can you play? Like, and that's the way they communicate. So I think there's a little bit of like a loss in the ability to understand how to communicate with parents. And it, depending on your parents, it could be a little intimidating,
Yeah, that's great advice. I think, yeah, I mean, I like the idea of making it where they can access you, but that it's not too comfortable, that we're not making this palette on the floor be something so fantastic that we want to stay, that the encouragement is for them to go and on their own time. Are there kids that it's not comfortable and they don't want to leave?
Not generally, but usually in the capacity that I'm working with families, we isolate what the underlying root cause is, right? And some of this needs coaching, you know what I mean? Like to come on and say like, all right, every kid's going to just put a sleeping bag down. You're going to fix it. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with families, right? In the generalized sense, you have to sort of figure out what your child wants, not needs, wants, and then manage to the want, right? As a parent, we're always accessible to the need. You need something, I am here every single time. Okay. You want something, and this is the best you're going to get. And this is the boundary as a parent that I'm willing to provide. Right. And so even with the older children where it's like, I want you to lay in my bed. You don't need me to lay in your bed. You want me to lay in your bed. And the boundary is I will lay in your bed and rub your back for 5 minutes. Timer went off. Okay. Now it's time to go to bed. Right. I had a mom hire me once for her school age daughter. She was in 5th grade, twirled the mom's hair for 90 minutes every night at bedtime. The mom hired me, was like, I have dreadlocks and my hair's falling out and I can't do this anymore. And I'm losing my mind. Okay. Without stating the obvious, why are you letting her twirl your hair for 90 minutes? Like, she's like, well, she freaks out if she can't twirl my hair for 90 minutes. I'm like, all right, well, you're the parent. So here's what we're going to do tonight, and sometimes parents are like, yeah, damn the man. All right. But I think it's just, we get so trapped up in it. And the mom's like, you're right. Like, why am I letting her twirl my hair for 90 minutes? I'm like, dude, just set a timer. Like, what are you comfortable with? If it's 10 minutes, gives her an outlet. She's obviously doing it from a soothing standpoint. And it's also a time of connection. While she's hair twirling, you could be talking about what Billy did in music class today and what you did in social studies. And how, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's that time to talk. So figure out a time you're comfortable with. And then you set the timer and you say, do you want to twirl my hair or just go to bed tonight? Well, I want to twirl your hair. That's what they're going to pick. And you go, okay, you may do it for 15 minutes and then it's time to go to bed. Right. And they go, okay. And then that's it. Timer goes off and it's like, all right, we're done now. Right. And you move on. And so it's starting to set that boundary, because then 15 minutes turns to 12 minutes, turns to 10 minutes, turns to like, why are we even doing this? But again, sometimes if you're cool with it for 5 minutes, like do it during the bedtime routine when you're reading a book together or journaling or meditating or whatever. Right. And make it be that transition. And the mom is like, gosh, like how crazy that I didn't think to just say, we're not doing this for 90 minutes. Instead, I just let her, my hair's falling out, when I really just set the boundary and she was fine with it, and then they had, obviously some more coaching around like the actual put down process, but you're kind of playing chicken with a kid. My mom had a sign growing up that said having kids is like being pecked to death by a chicken. And I didn't understand the sign at the time, but you're sort of saying like, okay, here's the boundary for you as a child. You're not taking your phone to your bed. Bedtime is 9 o'clock. We're not going to have caffeine or sugar after noon, and some of these things are hard, or you get 1 treat a day. My kids get 1 treat a day. Whenever you want it, that's fine, but that's your treat. Use it or lose it, And so we've kind of kept these little boundaries, right? And like when you keep those boundaries and they're very clear to the house and everybody's consistent with them, it just becomes a lot easier to like have that be the way it is. Like my kids don't ask to use the iPad during the week. Why? Because they don't want to say no. Why even
Mhm.
ask, you know?
Mhm.
So I think as
Mhm.
parents, like if you can figure out what you're comfortable with during the bedtime routine, it might be laying tonight. Well, you're not going to lay forever. So then the next night you say, I'm sorry, I can't lay tonight. I'm waiting for a package. I have to hear the door. You can hear the door when you're laying down, but you have to, my back hurts. I have to sit. Do you want me to sit or not at all?
Mhm.
Right. And I think as parents, you're getting over the course of a week to become that fruit striped gum over here by still being accessible, by still meeting in the middle with what they're looking for, but then ultimately getting over here. And you change the behavior through a consequence, right? And I think people, you hear that term and they go, oh, I don't consequence my kids, right? And I think the term is natural consequences sometimes, right? Sometimes it's truly like, you can't throw the stuffed animal at my face. That is an inappropriate choice. And now you lose
Mhm.
the stuffed animal for the night, right? I
Sure.
think it's okay to have boundaries and consequences. I think people are so scared of that, but also rewards. Like, what is the positive reinforcement? Like we have little charts that I was just showing that we use. I know you can't, see me on this, but like we do reward charts. So my kids have a gumball machine and I have plenty of these freebies right on my website. You can grab them. But like the gumball machine, my kids get to fill in a gumball every hour that they're at practice. When their gumball machine is full, they then get a special treat or a trip to Five Below or whatever it is that they want, right? My daughter's obsessed with the hand sanitizer right now at Bath and Body Works. So I'm like, we'll go on a shopping spree. And she picks like 5 hand sanitizers for $10 and thinks it's like, a new pair of expensive heels or something, right? Kids just like sometimes that positive praise of putting a sticker on the
Yeah.
chart. Like some of the kids, I do things like bravery bucks and I call them bravery bucks. And some kids are motivated, honestly, by earning things. Like, I had a couple that was going to Disney. Well, they were going to go to Disney anyway, but their kids needed to get like whipped into shape a little with sleep. So for every night they like slept through the night and settled easily at bedtime and did all this stuff. They earned Disney dollars that they could spend in Disney. The parents were going to buy them what they wanted in Disney World, but they didn't know that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it was like they were motivated to get the Disney dollars. Oh, and then they were siblings. How does Thomas have more than Emily? Right. And so then there was a little bit of like intrinsic kind of competition. Sometimes they started the night with 5. And
Mhm.
then every time they did something undesirable, they lost one, right?
Mhm.
So all of a sudden now there's a consequence to your choice, which is to lay quietly and read your book, right? Or go to bed. And we talked a bit on the last episode about the Zenimal, right? It's a hugely amazing product here in our house alone. It's a mindset and meditation turtle for kids. So it's screen free. It's so easy to put on, and there's like 9 meditations. So there's sleep, which is obviously our favorite, but they have like creativity, empathy, gratitude. I will tell you, some days my kids are not awesome. And I'm like, everybody sit down. We're doing a gratitude meditation. Cause I'm like, you guys have no idea how hard your dad and I work, And we drop in the middle of like the living room and I put it on and I make them both sit there with me and we do the meditation. Cause it's like, that is an unacceptable thing that just happened, right?
Mhm.
But it's like using rewards in a way that makes sense to a child. And these are just a couple examples, but there's things like being scared of ghosts or like this time of year is a big one. A lot of times kids will be like afraid of something and then parents are like, here's a monster spray.
Mhm.
No, then you just confirm that monsters exist by giving them a spray to
Mhm.
spray said monster, right? So we do something called the monster mash exercise, and it's really not that drastic, but I make it a pretty printout so it's easier. It's really just a blank piece of paper that has like a cutout of a mask. Okay. And you sit at the table and everybody has a mask and you all color it, right? Everybody colors their monster mask. Okay. And then you all pass it to the left. And then you add you all pass it to the left and then you add a, little something to somebody's mask and then you all cut them out and you go in the living room and you have a dance party to the monsters. Maybe you dress up, you have a good time. Everybody's having like being silly and goofy. The mind goes back to that situation at 2 a.m. and creating a positive monster experience versus like, is there a monster under my bed?
Mhm.
Right. And then also like arming a kid with a flashlight and say, if you need to feel a little more confident, here's a flashlight for you. Here's our
Mhm.
picture under your pillow. Right. Trying to help. I'm always huge on like helping create independence for kids, but frankly,
Mhm.
confidence. Like kids need confidence that they're able to sleep well and they feel good about it, right? Like your kids, the first time they get invited to a sleepover, if they can't sleep well, they're going to feel pretty sad to be like left out because they don't have that skill. So, I mean, there's just so much that can go on, but like I tell parents, like it's all fixable.
Yeah.
Like I've worked with so many situations and so many kids and so many challenges. And in every client, some take longer than others. I think it depends on what's going on,
Yeah.
but
That's
you can fix
great advice. Yeah, I love this. Okay, so what suggestion do you have for kids waking up in the middle of the night and they come to our bed? Let's say it's 2 a.m. Do we let them in our bed, take them back to their bed? What do we do?
So do not let them in your bed, boundary, right? My bed is now off limits. Walk them back, but do not touch them. Okay. Because a lot of times parents, what do we want to do? We pick them up and cuddle them, and then we drop them in the bed, then we rub their head, then we rub their back, then we tuck them in, then we give them a kiss, and we give them a cuddle. It's all these things, so nice. And then you're doing all the things, right? Well, who wouldn't want that in the middle of the night? Mom, while you're in there, rub my back, you know? So I always say like parents should be accessible, but not excessive. So instead of picking them up, just guide them back and say, go ahead, I'm behind you. Because now you're taking away a piece of that engagement, you know? And then things like, when you're putting them back to sleep, it might be that you're in a chair away from them, but not laying in their bed, right? What are they looking for? Usually they're asking for or wanting something, right? Not needing, wanting something. So you're again sort of going back to, do they want it or do they need it? And then how do I manage that? Right? So it's managing that we're doing the best we can as in a response. It keeps it freezes a little bit here. I don't know why that is. Hopefully you're
No,
good.
it's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. What about if they have trouble falling asleep? So at this age.
Yeah. So, I mean, falling asleep again, like timing, but if it's like a protest and they want you to lay there and rub their head and stuff, you have to slowly diffuse the behavior. I will sit in the chair, not at all. I will stand in the door, not at all. I will sit on the floor next to your bed or not at all, right? Like, and what are parents willing to do? And it takes about a week to balance the boundary, the expectation, and then the consequence for the choice, right? So I think when parents understand that there is going to, have to be some aspect of a consequence, that's what changes behavior. If it's just that they protest and then they get the reward, why would you stop protesting? There's no consequence. So if every night, at 3 a.m., if you freak out and yell and mom comes, why would you stop freaking out and yelling? Right. But if you freak out and yell and in the morning you want to watch Bluey, I'm sorry, you didn't sleep well last night. We're just not going to do the TV today because I need to rest your eyes. Right. Natural consequence. Your eyes are going to be tired because you were up. So it's not good to put the TV on. But tonight, let's try again. Right. And I think sleep training at any age takes about a week. Okay. So for any kids at any age, you've got about a week of shifting in behaviors that take a week to do. If you think you're going to fix this in 3 days, good luck, right? So you have to be committed to a week and doing it with consistency and with expectations, and with the right approach for your kids' behavior and what their challenges are.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think is the ideal bedtime for kids in elementary school?
I love a bedtime of 8 o'clock, by no later than 8 o'clock for kids in elementary school. Sometimes I would say lights off at 8 and then asleep by 8:30 at the absolute latest on nights like where my kids who are 8 and 10, right? So they're in the thick of elementary school. Like we shoot for 8 o'clock and they are usually asleep by about 8:15. If it's a random night where my daughter has dance now, it is what it is. And we try to do our best with it. But like, we are very much like quick bedtime people. It's like brush your teeth, rub your back, scratch your head, good, kiss, good night, bye. And then we're out of there in 2 minutes, and by we, I mean me. My husband lays in bed and reads his book or watches TV. It's really lovely. I'm like, do you guys want to say goodnight to your dad? They're like, no, we're good. You must feel so loved. Every once in a while they'll go in and give him a hug, but they just don't care. They want mommy,
Yes.
So, but yeah, so I mean, it's just like somewhere between 8 and 8:30, I think is appropriate, but I've gone like with kids as early as 7:30, and 7 o'clock. Like it depends on when you want them up in the morning, what time their bus comes, but anywhere between 7 and 8, I find is age appropriate. And then it gives them the chance to settle somewhere within like a few minutes there. Because again, if they get overtired, they're going to get overstimulated and then they're going to have a hard time falling asleep. So you definitely want to avoid it being like way too late of a bedtime. Sometimes we have to be the parents that say no, you can't watch a show after sports. You chose sports and we'll watch a show tomorrow or, and that's hard. I think as parents, like, I don't have a problem saying no. I don't want to be a yes parent, but I do sometimes feel bad. My husband's like, dude, it's Friday. Like, let him go do the thing. And I'm like, ugh, but I'm like, blame the day job, but they still wake up at the same time. They're still going to get up at the exact same time, whether they go to bed at 9 o'clock at night or at 8 o'clock at night. No offense, they're less of a jerk when they go to bed at 8 o'clock. So
Yeah.
I'm like firm with it because I don't want to deal with the repercussions. My kids don't do sleepovers. It is like they've had one each their entire life because I'm not going to deal with the repercussions of you staying up all night, and we're just firm on that, and so I think every family is going to have a different dynamic, and different preferences on things. But I definitely think like your kids love sleeping and they feel better. So like set a good boundary somewhere, around 8 o'clock, I would say at the latest.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, what do you want parents to take away from this conversation?
You can say no. You can say no, but honestly, consistency. If there's one word where I was like, how can I get my child to sleep through the night? Be consistent in what you're telling them. Be consistent in what you're willing to do. Be consistent in the consequences and rewards. Be consistent in your boundaries. Kids like consistency. As much as they push back on it, it gives them a sense of confidence and independence. And it actually reduces their anxiety when they know what to expect. They are still going to push, but their nature can't handle the freedom that we sometimes give them because we think we're doing them a favor and we're not. Like, be consistent. And I think they appreciate the boundaries. And I think in some cases, as kids get older, I hear this a lot too, is that it can actually be a blessing because they don't want to be on the text strings all night. So if my mom says I can't have my phone in my room, you don't have FOMO. You're not hearing your phone ping all night with, things. It's like, I'm sorry, that's the boundary. We'll talk in the morning, Yeah. And so I think it sometimes is good for kids when we as parents are the bad guys, especially in a time like, right now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All of this, again, has been so enlightening. I appreciate your time.
No, I thank you. I appreciate being here. Thanks so much.
Thanks again, Courtney. That was all really great advice. I think consistency is the key that I'm taking away from our conversation today, and thinking about ways that I can implement consistency in my kids' bedtime routine, but also just in general. With that, I will say thank you so much for your time today. Please like and subscribe to our show, rate us, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and keep the emails coming with topic suggestions for future shows to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a fantastic day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.